what I think about Kursk: bold, brilliant, beautiful. Keep it up. Putin started this, kick his ass. Bottom line is to the administration, I appreciate your support. Let these people fight. Give them weapons they need to win a war they can't afford to lose. When it comes to F-16s, way too long. They're here. Let's use them. Let's train Ukrainian pilots. When I talked to President Zelensky just a few minutes ago, if you're a retired F-16 pilot and you're looking to fight for freedom, they will hire you here. They're going to look throughout NATO nations for willing fighter pilots who are retired to come help them until they can get their pilots trained. So we're going to get these jets in the air sooner rather than later, and we're looking for pilots who are willing to fight for freedom as the Ukrainians train their own pilots. So my message is we need to be all in. Here's what I want to see happen in 2024, calendar year 2024. I want to see an invitation issued to Ukraine to join NATO. So I'm going to have dinner with the new Secretary General Thursday. I'm going to bring this up. I'm asking President Biden, before you leave office, make sure this invitation gets issued. There'll be another supplemental, I hope, in December. And it will be a military-centric supplemental. The weapons that they're using here are made in America, creating American jobs. And every weapon we give the Ukrainians are used to full effect. We've learned a lot about our own weapon system by providing them to the Ukrainians, what works and what doesn't. So I'm hoping that in December we can have another infusion of weapons provided by the United States to help the Ukrainians fight in 2025. I hope in 2024 an invitation will be issued to Ukraine.
That's Senator Lindsey Graham during his visit to Ukraine. I believe that was actually spoken yesterday, possibly the day before, but I'm pretty sure it was yesterday. And doggone it, as Ozzy made a wonderful reference to World War II, the Flying Tigers ride again. That's right. This is not the first time that there's been an irregular force of volunteer pilots sent to a nation to try and prosecute a war against a major enemy. Flying Tigers refers to China in the early part of World War II, when American pilots and American planes were sent to China in order to stop Japan from taking over all of China. And those men were, drummed out of the service, and they were, they were paid as these volunteers for the Flying Tiger group there. They were not part of the U.S. military by that point, at least not officially, and they had been severed from U.S. service at the time. Then, of course, when things got a little bit more official later on, I believe some of them were actually brought on board with U.S. forces. That's been a while. I'd have to look it up again. So U.S. pilots in U.S. planes in a foreign nation, not an unusual thing to have happen. So let's go ahead and jump on into what's going on. By the way, I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. Glad to have you here. I thought you guys would enjoy that bit from Lindsey Graham, who has really been kind of the lion behind a lot of the aid packages, kind of whipping the Republican side to get them into a position to support Ukraine in many ways. Now, the next thing I found interesting was this article from Important Stories stating, "No obstacles, just drive forward." A former commander of a Russian reconnaissance group explains why the armed forces of Ukraine broke through into the Kursk Oblast so easily. And this article is actually quite good. I'm going to go ahead and paste the link to it here into the comments so you guys can take a look at it as we go. Why did all these Russian Volunteer Corps and Legion, Freedom of Russian Legion, conduct their raids? To carry out additional reconnaissance of the area. They weren't just walking around and posting all these videos. For the media, it was an afterthought. Initially, any military stuff is done for military purposes. We did the same thing back in the day since 2014. he casually references Russia doing the same thing. We went in, observed the reaction, how quickly they respond to your arrival, how many forces are there, where, what, how, and then we left. Then again and again. So eventually the armed forces of Ukraine already had a plan, gradually pulled in troops in small groups so as not to make a large movement noticeable, and then just broke through. And he talks about all of this material here about how the everything was planned, textbook, conduct reconnaissance, chart the route, and do it quickly. And they push forward without securing positions. That's a lot of the conversation we're seeing here, is that the initial wave of Ukrainian forces just flowed into Kursk. They didn't bother with securing towns. They didn't search houses, door to door. They didn't pacify the citizenry. They came in, they drove the armed forces, such as they were, of the Russians out, capturing as many as they could. And they let the next wave handle coming in and taking control of those cities. They were moving and moving fast. And as he continues to say, now, by the way, this man did participate in the early stages of the war in Ukraine, the current assault. However, he is opposed to doing this. And so really, this is kind of an interesting perspective here, that he was there for it. He participated in it. He knows what Russia is like. And he states, if you want to defeat Russia, declare war, and it will screw itself up with inspections. And that's what happened here. While they were gathering to show up, the armed forces of Ukraine had already broken through deep inside, so it's impossible to stop them locally. For instance, they've penetrated, and he's just grabbing numbers here, let's say 15 kilometers. Meanwhile, the sabotage and reconnaissance groups go even further and start digging in. And when the Russian troops finally show up, the reconnaissance and sabotage groups just start attacking them. In this situation, he says, our forces didn't just respond late, they didn't respond properly at all, especially with this favorite line that everything is under control. We control everything. But then prisoners were captured, and they straight up say that they were only conscripts and border guards here, and they have nothing. That's why they surrender in whole packs, because firstly, the conscripts don't know how to fight, and secondly, they don't have the weapons to repel such attacks. And that explains the early days of this Kursk invasion, where Russia was wildly unprepared for it. So, Al, Ozzy, glad to see you both. Always glad to have you guys here. And if anybody else wants to chime in, I am watching and absolutely watching for those comments. Hi, Jerry. Glad to have you on board as well. So, as always, thank you for joining in. I am doing a few different things on software, and it's broken a few odds and ends. So things might not be quite so smooth as normal, but that's okay. I can make it happen. It's not. We're not going to die here, and I got to quickly move this over to the right a little bit, just a touch, like that. Okay, better. Anyway, so things might not be quite as smooth as the normal arrangement that we've got, but that's okay. We've just come off of nearly a month of me using a cruddy old laptop and my cell phone to try and do these streams. So I think you guys can survive with a little bit of that. Hi, Lucille. Always glad to see you as well. Glad to have all of you on board. So let's go ahead and jump into the news out of Ukraine. The big stuff, of course, is Kursk, and that's, of course, just sucking up all the oxygen in the room right now. Some interesting things going on. Russia has asked Belarus for some of their equipment in order to be able to put down this situation in Kursk. Interesting. But we'll talk about that in a little bit here. We've got a few other things to touch on first. An extended 16-hour curfew has been introduced to 201 settlements in Kharkiv Oblast in Ukraine. The regional authorities in Kharkiv Oblast have extended curfew hours from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. in these settlements. Now, I don't have the exact reason why, but I think it's all pretty clear that with things going on crazy just over the border, that they want to make sure that their citizens are as safe as possible, and they don't want to risk any friendly fire situations. Movement of civilians in Sumy Oblast as well is restricted within 20 kilometers of the Russian border. Same issue, and of course now the Russians are starting to shoot back, primarily targeting civilian structures and facilities on the Ukrainian side, especially in Sumy and Kharkiv Oblast. So keep that in mind. If you've got travel plans in Sumy or Kharkiv, you might want to put them on hold for a few more days. This one, I wish I'd known about in advance. However, this opened after I'd left the Georgia, so I didn't get the chance. A Ukraine-based eatery, Lviv Croissants, has opened its first U.S. location in Roswell, a suburb of Atlanta, on August 10th. Founded in Lviv in 2015, the chain has since expanded to over 180 stores across Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, and now adding the United States. Interesting. If you're in the U.S., you might give them a stop by if you can get into the area. Just an interesting little aside at the industriousness and willingness to work that we're seeing from those who are coming from Ukraine. Let's go ahead and move on to the news out of Russia. As we do, Al Bundy says, "Hey, Belarus, we used up all our outdated, crappy equipment. Can we have some of your outdated, crappy equipment?" Yeah, you'll see. You'll see. And I have a few comments about that when we get there. From the Russian side of the fence, Deputy Governor of the Belgorod region, Konstantin Polizeyev, convicted of bribery and sentenced to 5 years in prison and a 30. Then there's this interesting opinion piece from one of the ultra pro-Kremlin papers, offering clues on how life inside Russia may change as a result of Ukraine's Kursk offensive. And there's a lot of information here. I don't really have the time to play the whole thing. It comes from the BBC. Is it still buffering? Because it says here that things are working fine and it's got an excellent connection. Here, I'll take a quick drink break so that way we can... There we go. Now the stream should be all good because I streamed some water. So there we go. Anyway, this opinion piece, really, I found it's only about a couple of minutes long. Interesting here. I'm going to just drop the link in so you guys can check it out at your leisure. But the key part here is this part about going past the point of no return. It's already too late is what they're saying. And this is where I start to be concerned. We'll have to keep an eye on the circumstances over in Russia and the mindset that's appearing, because at this point, I'll tell you honestly, at this point, with the incursion into Kursk, for Russia, this has now become an existential crisis. For Putin, it's become an existential crisis. Russia can survive this. Russia is resilient in that way. But Putin cannot, because this destroys his strongman, protector of the country image. And that is part of his social contract with the people of Russia. I be strong man. I protect you. I keep the bad guys at bay. I keep them out of our country, and you just provide me with the resources to do whatever I want. That's the agreement he's got with Russia. They stay apolitical. They don't get involved. They don't cause a lot of fuss, as long as he keeps things safe. And this incursion into Kursk throws that into significant, sharp relief. Now, others will say this really doesn't play the same way in Russia that it does in the West, and I believe that. But it depends on the quality of the information that the Russians are receiving. If they're receiving Western quality information, there's going to be a lot more questions. But they're not. They're receiving Russian propaganda. So what the end result of this will be is anyone's guess at this point in time. Some people believe they know all and can predict these things. I don't belong in that group. I am more one that looks at how things are and comes to my own conclusions. Anyway, moving on. Explosions continue into the night in Voronezh region and other regions of Russia as air defenses have been working for hours. Military airfields and other sensitive facilities might be targeted. I've seen a few of them. I think one of the airfields called Baltimore. It may have been targeted directly, and there's reports of a direct hit there. But overall, still, that's Ukraine is not letting up on their um, other attacks in this regard. Kursk, however, does give Russia a reason to ramp up the recruitment drive. And Vladimir Putin's claim that the number of volunteers has been so massive, so huge, that they just can't process them all. They can't get them, they can't put them all through the paperwork fast enough. And yet the bonuses for signing up continue to rise. I know there are over 2 million rubles at this point in time, which is a fair chunk of change. I mean, honestly, even in Western dollars, that's still a pretty decent chunk of change. But they're saying it's so overwhelming that they can't just keep up. There's just so many people signing up. I already spoke about, oh, that's right. This one mentions the fire reported near Baltimore Air Base, which was home to a number of Russian strike aircraft. I do kind of need to say that some things are a little bit not quite as neat and tidy as I might have liked, because I've barely finished getting everything together about 10 minutes before starting the stream. So, yeah, a couple of things are going to be a little bit out of order, but that's okay. Vlad Vexler seems to have a really good finger on the pulse of the situation, and I really do appreciate his videos when I'm able to watch them. I'll have to check out this one, though. I've not seen it yet. A Russian resident of the Kursk region, and some of this Kursk stuff gets mixed in with the Russia stuff just because it's not really directly Kursk military stuff going on. But a Russian resident of the Kursk region tells how the Russian authorities organized the evacuation of civilians. We were told that there would be a train at 5 o'clock. A lot of people gathered. We arrived at the train station. There was no train. It had left. We've all been abandoned. Our head is a scoundrel, a real scoundrel. We don't know where she went. She's an idiot. And more talk of the evacuations there. Ozzy, let's go ahead and grab the location of the Baltimore airfield, Russia. See if we can figure that. Voronezh Malshivo, Baltimore. There we go. Get out the googly maps. It's right outside Voronezh. So there you go. That's what I thought I remembered, but I didn't want to say that one way or the other. Here's Kursk over here on the left, Belgorod down here, and Kharkiv right here to give you a little bit of perspective on where the Baltimore airfield is. So this is part of the whole operation, really. Just Voronezh should not be expecting to be spared from the strikes, I think I'll say. The acting governor of the Kursk region wrote that evacuated Russians would be sent to the Russian-occupied part of Zaporizhia region in Ukraine, with the area being resettled with the nearly 200,000 people that have been evacuated so far. It'll be interesting to see if they accept those particular accommodations. Russian propagandists, however, are back to Russian borders in nowhere. It's necessary to create the same thing as in Kharkiv region, a sanitary zone in Sumy region. And the question is, where does it end? Well, their only reasonable place is the ocean. That's right. Russian propagandists are talking about assaulting all the way through Europe straight to the ocean. All that just to stop these evil Americans and their evil plots to overthrow the Russians as a whole and as a nation. They're even talking about an even larger scale Ukrainian offensive in late August and early September, likely towards Crimea, along with a, quote, massive F-16 strike on the Crimean Bridge. Now, I'm just going to state straight up, what Ukraine's plans are, I'm not privy to them. I am not, shall we say, authorized for that information. But this appears to me to be just doom posting on the part of Russia's propagandists. I do expect a larger scale Ukrainian offensive in this time frame, and that is the correct direction, at least theoretically. It's the most logical one, which means that to me, they probably won't do it, because if you do exactly what your enemy expects, You're going to fall victim to what your enemy prepared for you. Either way, keep an eye out for new offensives. The Russians sure are scared about them. Now, this bit from Crimean Wind shows the owner of a small private military company, Paladin, named Georgy Zakrevsky, who recorded a video criticizing the Russian government for the failure of the special military operation and the collapse of the army. The point of no return has been passed, he said. We need to save the country. And he then called for a march on Moscow. I don't think it's going to be quite so easy this time. The Rosgvardia has been re-equipped up there. And if there's one thing tyrants and dictators do, it's put protection around themselves. Maybe we'll see if that's become the case yet. The Russian Black Sea Fleet has sent 25 ships out from the port of Novorossiysk. This is just 25 of them that are no longer in port. We don't know where exactly they went. With a few of them in the waters of the Simis Bay. So they may have been just repositioned to prevent them from being easy targets for Ukraine, or they might be out in operational situations. The timing might indicate that the hope is to cause havoc for Ukraine and get them to pull out of Kursk and take advantage of their operations up there if they can. But at this point, we don't know what their thoughts are with this part of the Black Sea Fleet. From the Ministry of Defense of the UK, the latest defense intelligence update that they've got on the situation talks about drinking water shortages. Some Russian military units fighting in Ukraine are likely experiencing potable drinking water shortages. Damage inflicted during ongoing Russian strikes against utilities infrastructure is now almost certainly curtailing water supply. Any water supply issues will have been exacerbated by a period of above-average temperature in the region. On the 23rd of July, a pro-Russian military blogger highlighted water rations for Russian pilots having been restricted to 1 liter per day. This is equivalent to a quarter of the minimum recommended water requirements for working in high temperatures. As a result, Russian pilots have reportedly approached local citizens for water. The blogger has appealed to Russian water-producing companies to supply Russian military bases with additional water in Rostov, Voronezh, and Crimean air bases. In response to water shortages, some Russian military units have been forced to improvise filtration attempts, using stagnant puddles for daily water requirements. This has highly likely led to an increase of waterborne diseases among Russian soldiers. This shortage of water leading to dehydration and increased risk of infection will almost certainly impact morale and operational effectiveness. How good can Russia's military be if they can't even get water to their troops? Let's go ahead and move on to the international front for just a little bit here. There's, again, not a ton of things, but I've got a couple of interesting ones I think you'll enjoy. NATO states should abandon the treaty banning the use of cluster munitions. And this is from the Military Times. Now, there's a whole article behind this. I don't need to go through the whole thing. I just want to briefly talk about cluster munitions, which have been revealed to be tremendously effective in this war. Now, U.S. And Western cluster munitions tend to have dud rates of very low dud rates, I should say. Nearly all of the munitions will explode upon impact, leaving very few behind. But when you're dropping hundreds of them, a dud rate of 1% is still several bombs being left in an area of a couple of hundred, yards, a square. So that's the reason why cluster munitions have been, by and large, banned by this treaty. But you know who didn't sign that treaty? The United States. I don't think Russia did either, but they're sure effective, especially when in this GPS-restricted environment. Where what could have been a guided precision strike may result in an entire miss, whereas a cluster munition only has to blanket the immediate area of the target in order to effectively neutralize it. So we may see the return of cluster munitions as primary munitions manufactured for future warfare. I don't know. Interesting, though. John Kirby got really fiery during a press conference the other day. This is Putin's war against Russia, and if he doesn't like it, he said, if it's making him a little uncomfortable, then there's an easy solution. He can just get the hell out of Ukraine and call it a day. The entire exchange here is actually just a small piece of a general press conference. Was where Anita from the Voice of America network asked the question about Ukraine being whether the this incursion in Kursk as the West being at war with Russia, and the strike on Kyiv and whether North Korean missiles were involved. She asked about that as well. Kirby couldn't confirm the bit about the North Korean missiles. That seems to have been broadly reported, but he doesn't have any details on that. But certainly he says it could be true. And if it was true, it wouldn't be inconsistent with what Vladimir Putin has been willing to do with North Korean military capabilities. Now, here's the interesting part. Look, Kirby says, we've been talking about this for quite some time. Putin is desperate. He's desperate for assistance and military capability because the export controls and the sanctions have basically turned whatever economy he had before this war into pretty much a wartime economy. And he's reaching out in desperation to countries like Iran and North Korea for help. And I'll add Belarus, but we'll talk about that later. It's dangerous, obviously, for the people of Ukraine as these missiles continue to rain down on them and their energy infrastructure. But it's also dangerous for the Indo-Pacific region. Any notion of a burgeoning defense relationship between North Korea and Russia will have ramifications for our collective security and our national security requirements in the Indo-Pacific. And obviously, we have to and we will take steps to mitigate that as best we can, not just by ourselves, but with our allies and partners. And your first question. You know, this is a funny bit of Putin propaganda here, and he's been clinging to it since the beginning of the war, that he had to go into Ukraine. NATO is surrounding him, and that NATO support and U.S. support for Ukraine just proves it's the West versus Russia. It's NATO versus Russia. It's the U.S. versus Russia. And it's all a bunch of horse hockey. There's nothing to it. The only people at war in Ukraine are the Russians. They're the ones that invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine is defending itself against that aggression. This is Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, pure and simple. Always has been since the beginning. I'm not going to talk about Ukrainian military operations. I'll let them speak to what they're doing. But make no mistake about it. This is Putin's war against Russia. And if he doesn't like it, if it's making him a little uncomfortable, then there's an easy solution. He can just get the hell out of Ukraine and call it a day. I'll leave it at that. That's quite the response there. Now, the rest of this is mostly about the Middle East and things like that. But it was a very interesting exchange there. And I thought Kirby really can pull out the word. He's a wordsmith when he needs to be. I'm just saying. Hi, Robbie. Glad to see you here. Always glad to have you on board. I'm glad to see you again. So the Russian Foreign Ministry summoned the Moldovan diplomat over there and said, okay, guys, we've been told that F-16 fighters that were transferred to you would be based, that are transferred to Ukraine would be based at Moldovan airfields. No. That's naughty. You're guaranteed you'd be neutral. And they said the Moldovan side was called upon to strictly adhere to its neutral status, which is the basis of the statehood of the Republic of Moldova, and not to take steps that could contribute to the escalation of the Ukrainian crisis, indicating, I'm not going to bother pronouncing it, involvement in it and have a destructive impact on the situation around Transnistria. The Moldovan Foreign Ministry called on the Russian ministry to rely on official sources and not fake news on the internet. The Republic of Moldova does not and will not accept weapons and military equipment, including aircraft intended for Ukraine. The Republic of Moldova is a neutral state, and its institutions will continue to adhere to the principle of neutrality. In this regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reminds that the only country illegally deploying troops and ammunition on the territory of the Republic of Moldova without the consent of the authorities is the Russian Federation. Once again, some of the interesting characters show their true stripes when they provide this type of solid, powerful statement. The Moldovans may have to remain neutral, but they've been fighting Russia for a lot longer than really, I think, most of the rest of us, at least for this round of the war. Ukraine received 4.2, let's see, Aussie states UK has been training Moldovan government troops. Interesting. I have not heard that, and I'll look that up. Not now, but interesting. Ukraine received 4.2 billion euros from the European Union for the humanitarian sphere. This is another one of their Ukrainian facility programs. 2.7 billion in preferential loan financing and a grant of 1.5 billion. This is intended to be non-military assistance to try and get power and infrastructure back together. So good for Ukraine in that regard. We mentioned in the previous video about the fire in the cooling tower of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It was reported it was tires. The IAEA showed up at last and did an inspection, said the cause of the fire could not be determined. There were no tires or drone debris found. The nuclear safety of the plant has not been compromised. Sounds like Russia's got their cleanup crew right on hand. Belarus to transfer military equipment to Russia amid Ukraine's operation in the Kursk Oblast. The recent delivery of Belarusian military equipment is related to an urgent request from the Russian side due to losses and a lack of equipment in Kursk Oblast and other areas, Belnovosti said, citing an undisclosed source in the country's defense ministry. Now let's talk about that for just a moment. We've seen some of the video of Belarusian equipment. They don't have cope cages. They don't have modern warfare. They're older tanks. They're older vehicles. You transfer those things into the zone with Ukrainian drone operators operating, they won't be there. And Russia is desperate enough to take whatever they can get their hands on to try and push Ukraine back. How much has Ukraine hurt Russia? Think about that for a bit there. How much damage has Ukraine done to Russia's national pride, their military, their long-term defensive and offensive capabilities? That they're asking Belarus to send over some more stuff. They're asking North Korea for more stuff. They're asking Iran, another country under heavy sanctions, for more stuff. Now, Ukraine, the much smaller combatant, you expect to need additional assistance. But Russia's always claimed to be the big bad. They've got the huge manufacturing capability. They're prepared for war. They've got huge backstocks of equipment. No, they've got Belarus sitting there a gear over. They got North Korean missiles and Iranian missiles. And I saw some North Korean, I think it was small armored vehicles, I think ATGM launchers. Russia's not in as good a shape as they like to say they are. And I've noticed the pattern with Russian propagandists and people who are sucking at the Russian money teat. They have gotten extremely loud since the start of the Kursk operation. Oh, this is the dying gasp. It's a Hail Mary pass. It's all these negative things about Ukraine. But Russia can't stop it. Not yet. So, let them get loud. You get the loudest noise out of empty barrels. Poland, for their part, signed a $10 billion deal to purchase Apache helicopters from the U.S. That's 96 Apaches. Hey, good on Poland for getting all the equipment they can. The concern I'd have is that helicopters are seeming to be pretty darn vulnerable these days on the front lines in Ukraine. That may not be a paying off purchase in the end. An op-ed from Isaac C. Flanagan states that in the third year of this full-scale war, it's time to admit that the Western doctrine of escalation management has failed. One of the things I think we forget is how much we in the West have held ourselves back. The Russians haven't held us back. The Russians have basically just sat there and screamed and yelled. And we are the ones that have put on the handcuffs. We're the ones that have said, oh no, we can't do any more than this because it might cause an escalation. That might cause a problem. Russia might get mad. We need to make it so that Russia's worried about what we are going to do, not the other way around. Right now, Russia's concerned about what the Ukrainians can do. And that's with our secondhand leftover cast-off gear. Russia has even trained its navy to strike targets deep inside Europe with nuclear-capable arms in a potential conflict with NATO. I'm sort of surprised they hadn't already done this, but I'd be willing to bet that if you really did the numbers, before now, they primarily trained to strike the United States, not NATO, not the European nations. And now they're preparing to strike Europe with their nuclear-capable arms. Just in case. Just in case. However, the UK kind of did something, an oopsie, I think. They did not give permission for Storm Shadows to be part of the Kursk incursion, whereas the US has said pretty much Ukraine knows the rules we put in place. They're doing everything in accordance with those rules. I'm surprised. Genuinely, because the Brits have generally been a much better ally than we have. So we will hope that this changes soon. The spokesperson for the German Ministry of Defense, Arno Kolatz, stated that Ukraine can use German weapons at its discretion. He emphasized that there is no question regarding the legality of Ukrainian military actions in Russia's Kursk region, as international law permits military operations on an aggressor's territory to defend one's own state. Translation: we got the opportunity for something really funny to happen, and that is for German armor to relitigate or rebattle out the Battle of Kursk. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Now let's go ahead and talk about Kursk for a little bit. We're kind of getting into the front line situation overall, but let's go ahead and move forward with Kursk, which is the biggest thing out there. Now, the Russians have been screaming that, oh yeah, everything's been stopped. The Ukrainians are not moving forward at all. We've got everything under control. From the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian forces appear to be advancing further within Kursk Oblast, despite recent mill blogger claims that Russian forces were stabilizing the front line in Kursk Oblast. That's right. Ukrainians have continued to take additional ground and capture more enemy troops. This was even from yesterday, so we're talking information that's already 24 hours old and outdated. The Ukrainian forces reportedly launched new incursions into western Kursk Oblast near Slobodka, Ivanovka, Tetkino, Gordivka, Uspinka, and Viktorovka. And again, the Russians are saying they stopped it. They say they stop it every day, like Ozzy just said. And every day, the Ukrainians manage to take something else. Now, Ukraine wanted to calm a few nerves over there in Russia. Ukraine is not going to seize the territory of the Kursk region. As a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry stated during his press conference, they're not going to seize the territory of the Kursk region. The military actions on Russia are necessary to liberate border territories from the Russian military contingent that is striking at Ukraine. He also stressed that this problem could be solved in a different way if the West would give Ukrainians the opportunity to strike at Russian territory with long-range weapons. So there's the reason for this entire incursion. Because they're not able to use those long-range Western weapons to hit military targets deep in Russia, they have to do it as any way they can. And so they've jumped in there to get this taken care of. Then there's a district over here. I believe it's the Bolshosoldatsky district in the Kursk region. It doesn't even border Ukraine. Authorities in that district have said, evacuate people, bail out, get out of here. So they're calling for that evacuation already, anticipating that Ukrainian forces might be there sooner than they expect. There were some explosions over in Kurchatov. I believe these were drones, not direct fire. Kurchatov is where the Kursk nuclear power plant is, so they don't want to hear anything exploding there for sure. As of today, around 2,000 Russian soldiers have now surrendered to Ukraine in Kursk, according to leaks from the Russian military command. Now, to put this into perspective, Ukraine reportedly has between 6,000 and 10,000 soldiers in the Kursk region right now. That's best estimates, so there could be bigger, could be smaller, probably bigger. The Russians have reportedly managed to scrape up about 10,000 themselves between a mishmash of border guards, conscripts, FSB, units they've pulled from the front lines in Ukraine and managed to truck up there, units that were pulled out of the Kharkiv region, about 10,000. And they've got the problem of they've got to pin down Ukrainian forces for their actions to take effect. In addition, Russian forces are still trying to get into the region, and everything that's on the move gets struck by Ukrainian drones in a hurry. So it's sporting over there in Kursk at the moment. Aussie states, I think we will know approximately when Ukraine culminates, when Ukraine starts to release more info. Silence means they're still advancing, I think. Same happened when Ukraine retook Kharkiv regions. Yes, they're staying pretty darn quiet, and they're still being extremely tight-lipped. Very little of the information we have is coming from Ukrainian forces. We do have a little, though, so we'll keep on going. Now, this is incorrect. It actually corrects himself later. Ukrainian forces are 24 kilometers to the west of the Kursk nuclear power plant in Lvov. It's a direct drive from there on the E38 highway. So we have a Ukrainian soldier, probably a sabotage group, not a full-on advanced force. But it's only about 35 minutes by drive if they go straight to the Kursk nuclear power plant. Maybe that is the target. I'm still not convinced, but you know what? When they put the flag up over the Kursk nuclear power plant, I'll be the first to say I was wrong. Now, this I'm going to put into the rumor category right here. Igor Sushko states that there was a leak that so many Russian soldiers are dying in the Kursk region that there is now a backlog on identifying corpses at the military morgue in Rostov. In fact, they're having to redirect them to other areas. Bodies of soldiers that died on August 7th are yet to be identified from 6 days ago, and the bodies are no longer being taken to Rostov. It's possible. The rate of advance would indicate to me, at least, that it's more likely that many of them are left on the battlefield. If the casualties are that large, then again, there are the troops that are on the move and getting hit in convoys. We'll see. A Russian Ka-52 attack helicopter attacked a Russian column. That's right. He spotted a bunch of vehicles moving around and said, aha, those have to be Ukrainian, and destroyed a Mista S 152 millimeter self-propelled howitzer, and actually destroyed one and damaged the other. So those Ka-52 attack helicopter pilots don't have their friend or foe thing doing very well. The Kursk regional governor announced that 180,000 residents are subject to evacuation for a whopping 15% of the region's population. I've seen others that estimate it closer to 16%. And if you watch the video carefully, you see they're getting onto these green buses here. Now, that's kind of interesting, and I'll tell you why, because somebody else told me why. Specifically, Tendar stated, during the Syrian war, Russia aided the Syrian regime to displace millions of Syrians from their home. Many were deported in the infamous green buses. Pro-Russians, pro-Assad elements were constantly mocking fleeing Syrians with the green buses. Seeing Russians fleeing now, and especially using green buses, is karma or God's wrath, depending on what your belief is. But even when you are not religious, this episode tells us that might is right is not a good way to make policy. It is a double-edged sword, and eventually, probably soon, it will come back to you. And this is the perspective of many people who are supporting Russia. Might makes right. Russia's willing to use that might. And therefore, Russia will win. But in the end, the mighty will fall. Their strength will leave them. And they will find themselves cast down, weakened beyond all hope. So we will see what really happens in the long term. A little bit of symbolism to go with your report on the Ukraine war. Sersky stated that Ukraine now controls around 1,000 kilometers squared of Russian territory, with this footage from downtown Sudza being used as evidence of their easy maneuvering throughout the town. There's been reports that Ukrainian forces are able to move long distances on highways without even having to slow down for military needs, and therefore showing that they have full control of the areas, at least full operational control. On top of that, President Zelensky said that 74 communities are under Ukrainian control. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on this and ask if maybe it might have been a mistranslation or something like that. Or a mistake, but this is directly from Zelensky's own account. The Russians are saying 28 communities. Zelensky says 74. Another one says, another Ukrainian source says around the 28 to 30 range. I don't have a good feel on the actual number. And what they're considering a community could be vastly different, because there's always these little pop-ups of a couple of dozen houses that are a community. So maybe there's just how they're counting the communities. Still, they are putting the stabilization measures in these towns that they have now taken under their control. And they're looking for the development of humanitarian solutions for these territories. And then he thanked the warriors for their heroic service. Russian looting is old news, but this is Russian looting in Russia. It seems like Russian soldiers have gotten into the habit of looting things when they're either entering or leaving a territory, and now they're doing it to themselves in the Kursk region. This was from a mobile phone that was taken from a soldier who recorded himself looting this place. And when he was captured by Ukrainians, they took the phone and took the video and posted it up. So that's quite interesting. Be prepared for a lot of disinformation, I might add. Videos like this might get put out there saying the Ukrainians are doing it. There's expectation that there will be false flag operations, Russians in Ukrainian uniforms doing attacking civilians, etc., etc. So keep an eye out for that. In this case, though, Russia looting Russia looks just like something Russia would do. To show some of the effects of this, Politico states that Putin is pulling units out of Ukraine to defend Russia. And I'm not going to go through the whole article here, but by and large, most of the initial ones were out of Kharkiv, which were close. But there's been reports he's pulled small amounts of units, and this is where it's kind of pretty specific that there are only small numbers of men or small units that are being pulled and sent to Kursk, particularly pulled from the Zaporizhia area and Kharkiv area, not so much from the east where Russia's still trying to push hard on Pokrovsk. So there's a little bit pulled from there, but overall, Russia's having to pull those troops in small numbers to move them to Kursk. Few maps for you that I've got right here. Still got so much to talk about on Kursk. Ukrainian armored vehicles have visually confirmed entry into the village of Giri, which is down here in the bottom right corner. They're operating unimpededly between this village and Belitsa, which is right here next to it. It is the strongest indication so far that the entire area between Sudza and Giri is under Ukrainian control, possibly even all the way to Belaya. So, something I want to just clarify here. Tindar actually stated that they had pulled their map back to a much more conservative estimate, more likely this area right here on the east side. And he had to actually say, I was too conservative. Here's the latest information. And there's this huge area that he suspects is under Ukrainian control, or at least in a gray zone at this point. This is the area that's confirmed they've got effective control over. This is the area that's likely now gray zone, if not under control. The Ukrainian forces reached the outskirts of Koronivo, I should say, with battles occurring east and even north of that town. So it's around in this area here. So once again, we're seeing various reports out of the Russians, minimal information out of the Ukrainians. These battles are taking place past the towns that are still being held by Russian forces, at least at this point in time, indicating that Russia doesn't have much control. Ukraine's Air Force has been doing precision strikes to support the situation in Kursk. They struck the town of Tetkino with JDAM bombs, guided bombs. An industrial area and the nearby forest area were hit. Probably there were Russian forces in the forest area. They tend to like to hide there, as does everybody else. I already talked about Bolsha Soldatsky. We're over here. That's this entire district area. That's east of the conflict zone right now and not currently under attack. But this is the one that's been told to evacuate now. That's quite a bit of territory. Nearly the entire civilian population of the Krasnoyarsk district of Russia's Belgorod region have been evacuated, according to the regional governor. Ukrainian forces are continuing to make headway in Kursk. Well, Belgorod's right there. This is a funny one right here. As the Ukrainian forces are passing through this village, somebody yells, Slava Ukraini, to them. And it turns out it's the local drunk. He's just sitting there leaning against a wall, saw the Ukrainians going past, and he says, Slava Ukraini. Despite the difficult, intense battles, the advance of our forces in the Kursk region continues. The exchange fund for our state is replenished. 40 square meters are occupied per day, kilometers of the territory of Russia. Probably meant 40 square kilometers here. That's quite a lot and quite a bit more than Russia's able to do at this point in time. From the speaker of Ukraine's MIA, Ukraine is not interested in taking the Kursk region. We don't need someone else's, unlike the Russian Federation. Talk about shade there. Now, the Akhmat soldiers out of Chechnya have been all over the TikToks, making sure that people know that they're fighting for Ukraine. And they're also getting captured by Ukraine. IDs of Akhmat unit servicemen captured after the defeat by the 225th Assault Battalion during the Kursk Liberation Operation. Now, this is only 9 individuals here. But the Akhmat battalions have been running away primarily. The fact that Ukraine was able to catch up enough to actually capture some is pretty impressive. Now, this one, I'm going to go ahead and back this up. I'm going to mute this. The audio is not needed. This is a Ukrainian vehicle moving in Kursk, and you'll see in just a moment here that it's hit by a drone. Pretty big explosion, but everybody inside appears to be safe and able to react. They do bail out of the vehicle and get into the wood line. But the fact that they're all still intact and able to operate despite having an explosion right beside them, that's pretty impressive. Pretty darn impressive. They responded like soldiers and patriots. Russian sources summarize that the armed forces of Ukraine continued a significant offensive along nearly the entire combat line in the Kursk region, making multiple attempts to break through, particularly around Koronivo, Olgino, and towards Kachuk and Berdin. He says battles for breakthroughs are expected to continue over the next few days. Now, this one also made me laugh. This is a Ukrainian MP, not military police, but a minister of parliament. He's, let me go and just unmute this for a moment here. He is entering Kursk. He says he won't be able to, he will be unavailable for votes in the near future. That's because he's going in there and he's part of the operation to enter Kursk at this point in time. So, kind of an interesting little aside there that he took the time to record this. Obviously, nothing really militarily significant to it, except for the fact that he has the time to, in a place that shouldn't be that easy for him to just stand around and do a video. So good on him for getting out there and getting to be part of the operation. Here's Lyubomovka in the Kursk region, a Ukrainian defender, renamed it to sound Ukrainian. Lyubomivka, there we go. So they're just having some, I hate to say it this way, but they're just having some fun at the expense of the Russians. I don't know if I really want to go quite on board with that full statement, but you know what I'm saying there. They're taking the time, they're having the time to do these types of things because they have so easily caught Russia with their pants around their ankles. Kind of a Russian map of the situation overall, showing some of the areas under Ukrainian control. As George Kacharova stated, this is pretty much confirmed, and it shows about 1,050 square kilometers under the control of Ukraine. Now let's talk about the Sudza gas metering station. This is the only Russian gas pipeline supplying gas to Europe. Igor Sushko says that this metering station is no more, showing video of the destroyed facility. But Bloomberg says that Ukraine and Russia plan to maintain gas supplies through the Sudza gas metering station in the Kursk region, despite ongoing hostilities. And I'm going to have to look up the Sudza gas metering station to see what it looks like. If it got destroyed, well, it's not going to be used to ship gas to Europe. So, welcome to the fog of war, I guess. The Kyiv Independent reported it was 28 settlements, not 74, though this is from yesterday, not today. Vladimir Putin's been incensed. We'll just put it that way. He has vowed a worthy riposte to Ukraine's Kursk incursion. One of the obvious goals of the enemy is to sow discord, strife, intimidate people, destroy the unity and cohesion of Russian society. Yeah, that sounds familiar. That sounds exactly like something Russia did to Ukraine. And that's pretty much the Kursk region here. Let's go ahead and get into the front lines real fast here, kind of get a little bit of broader perspective. Understand this map is at least a day, if not two, out of date. Here's the area near Kursk. You can start in the Kursk region. Like I said, this is out of date. And he actually showed it, let's see, yep. Hasn't even updated this in the last 24 hours. No changes over in the Kharkiv region. I think there's still operations going on, but no significant changes to the front lines. Few changes over here near Pishene. Let me just pop this back a day. You can see that's just a couple little changes. The Russians have pushed forward a bit here and ended up being pushed back a bit here. And down here, This is where the, I guess, the real progress, if you want to call it that, is taking place. This section of area right out of Ivanivka there, that's all open territory. Nothing significant there, but it does get them closer to Horovdivka and generally closer to Pokrovsk. About 15 kilometers left to get to Pokrovsk. It's a slow and steady pace there. My gut feel, at least based on what I'm seeing, is that it's slightly slower, but not tremendously so, because it seems like when those troops were pulled out to be sent to Kursk, the order went out to assault everywhere. So the Russians seem to be just doing everything they can all over the front lines to try and prevent Ukraine from taking advantage. I mean, that's militarily sound. War Gonzo kind of downplays the situation in the Kursk region, generally confirms everything else, with Zaporizhia being no significant change. Donetsk, he's claiming more progress than is showing elsewhere, but not too far off the mark. Kharkiv front, heavy fighting, no changes. And Kursk region, he actually says that with the arrival of Russian armed force reserves here, there is no point in talking about any advances by the Ukrainian armed forces, but the situation remains tense. Look at the phrasing. There is no point in talking about any advances by the Ukrainian armed forces. Note he doesn't deny that advances exist, just that there's no point in talking about it. Do you want to bet that his FSB minder was standing over his shoulder when he wrote that? Just saying. 13th Brigade of Operational Assignment Kartia defeats a big Russian push involving numerous vehicles, including turtle tanks and infantry on Lipsy in the Kharkiv Oblast. Just kind of a little bit of video footage of some of that the stuff going on there. Updated map showing the Russian advances on the Pokrovsk front. I already talked about it. You can see here, like everybody was told to just advance any way they can. And that's the reason why they've been capturing more open areas. Russians are expecting another insertion or a feint move in the Troborovo direction of Bryansk. In other words, going into Bryansk as well. That area is also lightly defended, so we'll have to see if Russia can actually put together anything worth fighting for over there. However, the situation near Kursk has not changed the situation near Toretsk, with the Russians continuing to battle and reaching the outskirts of the town. Some of the other things I've already mentioned this in Kolotelivka. That's an area where battle has been taking place. Understand the Russians have claimed that was over, but this was done some hours later, saying things were still taking place. More information on Kursk here, indicating that heavy fighting in these areas of Tolpino, Alexandrovka, and Vetrino, also in the Kursk area. And here's Knoll Report's double Kursk update, kind of giving some broader maps here. Armed forces of Ukraine increased its control in two places, the fields west of Malaya Loknaya and near Koronivo. The geolocated footage makes them confidently believe the armed forces of Ukraine have increased presence with attacks and sabotage happening near Sheptukovka, Kachuk, and Kromsky B. At Koronivo, there are two areas of attention, the eastern outskirts, with geolocated footage showing the Ukrainians there, as well as the northern part of the ponds at the Dorovka Vetrino, which is also assaulted by armed forces of Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine are close, if not inside, the town. And Sudza in the area east, they confidently confirmed that Melovoy, Zamosta, Dmitriukov, and Plakovo came under Ukrainian control. New reports of fighting east of Plakovo came in, and they believe that Borki may already be under the armed forces of Ukraine's control. Still needs confirmation, but still, there you go. Some lovely maps for you guys to take a quick gander at. Have a pretty good idea what's going on. And that's the situation on the front lines. Ukraine doing some amazing stuff in Kursk. Russia still managing to push a little bit here and there over near Pokrovsk. A few other little places with a few things handing off both directions. Lots and lots of vicious fighting, just so we're clear. A lot of sacrifice being taken place. Let's go ahead and get into the interesting extras. Don't got a lot today, but I got a couple things. And I'm going to start off with this one from the Russian Ministry of Defense, who've been publishing a series of videos of successful strikes on Ukrainian armed forces. These videos were filmed in July in Ukraine, not in August in Kursk, and often are showing actually Russian forces getting defeated by Ukrainian forces that they're just mislabeling. And one of these, they claim these things are what's going on, but the truth is they're just performing disinformation. These videos are often easily disproven, easily found, having been published for weeks, if not months. And that's part of the problem, is trying to sort through all the people that are posting incorrect things. How about a little joke, though? A great joke from Russia, from Sergei Lusomliny. Putin, after 10 days of the Kursk catastrophe, summons Stalin's ghost. Stalin asks, "What happened?" Putin says, "Nazis are at Kursk. My army is beaten. What should I do?" Stalin says, "Do like me in 1943. Send the best Ukrainian troops to the front and ask the U.S. for arms." I love me some World War II humor. So we'll end off. Got to mute the music here. Guarantee that. What are the Ukrainians fighting for? I'll show you what they're fighting for. This is a border guard returned home to his young daughters. As a father with 3 girls myself, although older than these girls, I can only imagine the emotions he's going through. And them as well. Knowing Dad's home. And that's everything for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm, as always, glad to have you guys here. Hang on a second. I got to hand do a few things here. There we go. Boom. There we go. You guys make the stream worthwhile. You're part of what keeps me motivated doing it every time I can. So thank you. Ozzy, Lucille, Jerry, Robbie, Al, all of you make the difference. So thank you. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on the next video.